Let's talk about something that people think about all the time in recovery, but don't always talk about out loud: dating, sex, relationships. Because the truth is, recovery doesn't turn off your desire for connection. If anything, it can amplify it. You're feeling more, you're aware of more, you're no longer numbing or escaping in the same way. So naturally, part of you is going to reach outward, toward people, toward intimacy, toward closeness. And that is human. But here's where we need to slow things down enough just to understand what's actually happening beneath the surface. Let's define this properly. Dating and intimacy in recovery is about forming emotional and physical connections with others while you're still learning how to form a stable, honest, and regulated relationship with yourself. And that second part is not so small. Because recovery is not about stopping a behavior, it's about changing how you relate to your own internal experience. Your thoughts, your emotions, your stress, your discomfort, and your loneliness. All the things that used to get managed externally now need to be understood internally. And when that work is still new, still fragile, still developing, adding another person into that system can get complicated. Not because relationships are bad, but because relationships are powerful. You've probably heard people say, don't date for a year. And that can sound rigid, it can sound outdated, it can even feel unrealistic. So instead of treating it like a rule, let's understand it like a principle. Early recovery is a time when your energy, your attention, and your emotional capacity are already being stretched. You're building routines, you're learning new coping strategies, you're trying to understand triggers, and you're working through emotions that you may have avoided for years. And then a new relationship shows up. Now there's attraction, anticipation, texting, time together, expectations, uncertainty, vulnerability, conflict, and excitement. That's a lot. And your system may not yet have the tools to navigate all of that in a steady way. One of the biggest risks here is something people don't always recognize right away. You can start using a relationship the same way you used a substance. Not because you're trying to, but because your brain is wired to seek relief, connection, and reward. That early stage attraction, that pull towards someone, that feeling of being wanted or understood, it activates your dopamine system, the same system that was involved in substance use. And without realizing it, that person can start to become your new regulation strategy. That's what we mean when we talk about addiction transference. It might look like this: you feel anxious, so you reach for them. You feel lonely, so you need their attention. You feel uncomfortable, so you distract yourself with a relationship. You avoid doing your internal work because being with them feels better. And again, none of this makes you a bad person, it makes you human. But it also means that your recovery work starts to quietly take a back seat. And that's where things can drift. Another piece to understand is how relationships introduce new environments and new triggers. You might find yourself in social settings you wouldn't normally choose. You might feel pressure to engage in things you're not fully comfortable with yet. You might experience emotional highs and lows that you don't quite know how to regulate without your previous coping mechanisms. And now you're trying to manage all of that while still learning how to manage yourself. That's a heavy lift. There's also the emotional side of this. New relationships bring vulnerability. You're opening up, you're sharing parts of yourself, and you're navigating uncertainty. And in recovery, vulnerability already feels heightened because you're no longer buffered by substances. So what can happen is that the emotions feel bigger, faster, and sometimes overwhelming. Without solid coping, that can lead to reactivity, avoidance, or dependence. Now let's shift for a moment. So what if you're already in a relationship? This is where things become less about whether you should be in one and more about how that relationship adapts to recovery. Because recovery will change you. It will change how you communicate. It will change how you cope, how you show up, what you tolerate, and what you need. And that can create friction. Your partner may be used to a version of you that handled things differently. Maybe there was avoidance. Maybe there was emotional shutdown. Maybe there was chaos that felt familiar. And now you're trying to build something more stable. That's a transition, and transitions are uncomfortable. This is where honest communication becomes essential. Not perfect communication or scripted communication, just real. Saying things like, I'm learning how to do this differently. I don't have all the answers yet. I need space to figure this out. I want to stay connected, but I also need to protect my recovery. That kind of honesty builds something real. It also gives your partner room to do their own work because recovery doesn't just impact the person with substance use, it impacts the system around them. Your partner may be dealing with their own patterns, maybe including codependency, which can look like trying to fix you, manage your emotions, walking on eggshells, losing themselves in the process. And again, that's not about blame, it's about awareness. Because healthy relationships require two people who can take responsibility for themselves. Now let's talk about sex more directly. Sex is not just physical, it's emotional, it's neurological, it's relational, and it activates the same reward pathways in the brain that substances do, which means it has the potential to be grounding or dysregulating, depending on how it's being used. So the question isn't, should I be having sex in recovery? The question is, what is my relationship with sex right now? Am I using it to connect or am I using it to cope? Because sex can easily become a way to avoid loneliness, seek validation, distract from emotional discomfort, or just temporarily feel okay. And when that happens, it starts to mirror the same patterns we're trying to shift in recovery. There's also something else that comes up here, and that's boundaries. In early recovery, boundaries are still being developed. You're learning how to say no, how to listen to your gut, how to recognize when something just doesn't feel right. And without strong boundaries, it's easier to end up in situations that don't align with your values or your recovery goals, which can lead to regret, confusion, or emotional setbacks. This is where slowing things down becomes a strength and not a restriction. Taking your time, checking in with yourself, and asking honest questions, because you're not avoiding life, you're building it with intention. And underneath all of this, there's a deeper layer. Recovery is about developing intimacy with yourself. And in all honesty, that might be one of the most uncomfortable parts. Sitting alone with your thoughts, learning what you actually feel, understanding your needs without immediately trying to meet them externally. That kind of self-connection becomes the foundation for everything else. Because when you can be with yourself, you don't need another person to complete you. You can choose them. And that creates a very different kind of relationship. Before we close this out, there's one more important piece. We also have to have awareness around intimate partner violence. Early recovery can involve vulnerability, emotional intensity, and shifting power dynamics. And in some situations, that can create risk. This isn't meant to create fear, it's meant to create awareness. We'll go deeper into this in a separate video. For now, just know this. Your safety matters. Your voice matters. Your boundaries matter. So if we bring all of this together, dating and sex in early recovery isn't something to avoid completely, but it is something to approach with honesty, awareness, and patience. You're not just learning how to be in a relationship with someone else, you're learning how to be in a relationship with yourself. And when that relationship becomes steady, grounded, and real, everything else starts to fall into place a whole lot more naturally.